TFA Fam, it's your boy Kev back again with another video. Today we're going to be discussing Hunter Henry and Jonnu Smith signing with the New England Patriots and what that means for the 2021 fantasy season. We're going to do that right now. Let's go. All right, welcome back into the video. Before we jump into the content, make sure to hit that like and subscribe button for future content because it really helps us grow and lets YouTube know that this is good content. So let's just jump in it, shall we? All right, so the New England Patriots kicked off their firestorm of moves that they've made, locking up over $140 million or something like that in total contracts so far. Just out here blowing money like it's blowing a hole in their pocket. They started off with, just signing Jonnu Smith to a 4-year, $50 million deal. And when the news initially broke and it happened, I think a lot of us are pretty excited about, what that meant for the fantasy perspective of Jonnu Smith, because Jonnu Smith had been in an offense where he was kind of behind A.J. Brown, Derrick Henry, rushing the ball. It was a very low volume offense, and putting Jonnu Smith with a team that had really no wide receivers, no other pass catchers, meant that he was probably going to be the lead target getter. However, we throw a big old wrench into that today with the New England Patriots signing Hunter Henry to a 3-year, $37.5 million deal. So let's just go ahead and talk about what that means. Let's start with Jonnu Smith. Over the past 2 seasons, Jonnu Smith ranks 3rd in yards after the catch per reception, 8th in yards per route run among all tight ends. But he finished 22nd in targets, 31st in routes run, while ranking 1st in run blocking snaps since 2019. As of 2020, he was 26th in routes run while playing on an offense that was 30th in pass attempts per game. He averaged 4.6 targets per game, a 16% target share, and had 18 red zone targets, which was 5th among all tight ends. Over the last 2 seasons, he's only had 4 deep targets, so he really wasn't utilized all that much as a deep threat. 41 receptions, 448 receiving yards, 9 touchdowns. He averaged about 10 fantasy points per game and had 1.63 yards per route run, and 11th in yards after contact, and 6th in fantasy points per route run. Obviously, he was utilized in a very low-volume offense where the opposite can be said of Hunter Henry. Hunter Henry ranks 8th in targets and 5th in routes run over the last 2 seasons. He also ranks outside the top 15 in run blocking snaps. He also has commanded at least 60 targets in 3 of his 4 NFL seasons, and that is something Jonnu Smith has only done once in his entire career. Now, looking at Hunter Henry's 2020 season, he was 7th in routes run while playing on an offense that would rank 5th in pass attempts per game. He averaged 6.6 targets per game, 16% target share, 13 deep targets over his last 2 seasons, 60 receptions, 613 yards, 4 touchdowns, 10.4 fantasy points per game, 1.33 yards per route run, which is 22nd, and 13th in yards after the catch, and 24th in fantasy points per game. With all that being said, obviously, Hunter Henry's been on a much more pass-heavy offense, one that's not so much dedicated on the run, much like Jonnu Smith has in his career. Now, the Patriots have been a team that has not been willing to throw the ball. If you look at this past season, they were 31st in pass plays per game. Cam Newton finished with 2,600 passing yards, 8 passing touchdowns. But what we do know is that Cam Newton has a strong track record of targeting his tight ends. If you go back and look at Greg Olsen, he was almost top 10 in targets, among all tight end every single year. So we know he looks for the tight end position. Now, one thing that's been brought up quite often with this has been the Patriots kind of going back to what they did in the early 2010s with Rob Gronkowski and Aaron Hernandez. Now, I get it. Neither one of these guys are Rob Gronkowski. We know that. But I think they're going to look to run a lot more 12 personnel. Last year, it was a very, very small amount. I think it was like 22 snaps. They ran 12 personnel or something like that. But I think you see this number go up to like 60, 70%. Because if you look at what they've done, they've also signed Nelson Aguilar, Kendrick Bourne. They still have their NFL draft to go through. Maybe they draft a wide receiver there. But their wide receiver room is still really weak. Jacoby Myers comes back. None of these guys, they don't have that alpha wide receiver. If you go back to the 2010s, they had Wes Welker, who was getting like 150, 160, almost 170 targets during this time. That's not going to be the case. So let's just go back and take a look at how things, if they're going to be used somewhat similarly, what could we at least somewhat expect to try to project here? Over that stretch from 2010 to 2012, the Patriots were able to support 2 tight end ones in fantasy, only one of those years. Gronkowski and Hernandez both finished as top 3 tight ends in PPR scoring in 2011. So in 2011, Gronk was obviously the tight end 1, 121 targets, 90 receptions, 1,300 yards, 17 touchdowns. God, he's good. 9.55 average depth of target, where Aaron Hernandez was tight end 3 over that time, 108 targets, 79 receptions, 910 yards, 7 touchdowns, a 7.06 average depth of target. One theme here over these 3 years that Gronk was much more of that deeper. Gronk was used much more down the field, where Aaron Hernandez had a much lower average depth of target. But in these 2 years, 2011, 2012, I mean, the Patriots were top 5 in pass attempts per game. The only one that maybe would be a little bit more comparable that maybe the Patriots could get to was 2010, which was Gronk's rookie season. Brady was 16th in pass attempts that year with 3,900 passing yards and 36 touchdowns. Gronk was tied at 11, only 57 targets, 546 receiving yards, 10 touchdowns, 9.58 average depth of target, and 6 red zone targets. Hernandez was tied in 14, 64 targets, 45 receptions, 563 receiving yards, 6 touchdowns, 7.36 average depth of target. I mean, the Patriots are obviously a much more run-first offense these days. They're even talking about bringing in another tight end or another running back. They are linked to Leonard Fournette. They are linked to Chris Carson. The guys that they do have heavy interest in. So this is still a team, and then they still have Damian Harris and Sonny Michel. This is still a team that really wants to run the football. And Cam Newton, I don't think they're wanting to put him out there and have him be top 5 pass attempts. That would be a big mistake. So I think that what you can expect is a lot of 12 personnel. I think you probably look at Jonnu, because Jonnu Smith is much more fits into that role of that pass blocking, run blocking tight end, and where Hunter Henry really hasn't been. I mean, they haven't really asked him to do that. He wasn't asked to do that with the Chargers. So as much as I love Jonnu Smith, who is an absolute beast and freak of nature at tight end, I do think that they're going to ask him to be more of that traditional blocking tight end. Not that he's not going to go out and receive routes, but I think that you see a little bit more what we see from Aaron Hernandez and play maybe a little bit more of that Aaron Hernandez role and kind of play second fiddle a little bit to Hunter Henry. Now, the good news is, because this wide receiver room, I do think there's a chance here that what we can see for this team, that, both of them could end up leading this team in targets. But if it's a low volume offense and they're not throwing the ball that much, it takes down their ceilings quite a bit. So as of right now, I do think that you have to value Hunter Henry a little bit more, though I think that Jonnu Smith could be an absolute weapon inside the red zone. But as we know, that Cam Newton likes to run the ball once we get down inside the 5, so that can also lower their ceiling a little bit. But I think that Hunter Henry is probably the guy to target, but he's probably like a low-end tight end 1 at best right now, and Jonnu probably falls a little bit outside of that, maybe tight end 13, tight end 14, tight end 15, and that is hoping that they raise their ceiling quite a bit in terms of pass attempts per game. So I think that's pretty much where I come in on them right now. We'll see what they do through the draft. We'll see what happens here. Maybe they do add another quarterback. Maybe they add a Mac Jones or something like that through the draft, and we'll see how that plays out. But as of right now, I think that's where I have these guys. I think either of these guys really stand out to me as guys that you just absolutely have to have on your team, which is a shame, because I was really hoping for big things this year for Jonnu Smith. But, in Bill Belichick fashion, he put a stop to that real quickly and all that hope. So with all that being said, I appreciate everybody checking out the video. Again, please hit that like and subscribe button. Tell me what you guys think about Jonnu Smith and Hunter Henry, and are you going to be looking to draft them at all, depending on where they land in fantasy football and their ADP comes in. So with that being said, I'll see you on the next one. Peace.